Nos va a acompañar de nuevo Alicia Colson, que los que habéis estado por la mañana ya la hemos conocido. Ella estudia las culturas antiguas, pero nos va a hablar de algo distinto, que es la inteligencia artificial. Va a hablar de una empresa que se llama Land Conservation, y lo que está haciendo es mejorar las empresas que trabajan con ellos para que sean maximizar el impacto que tienen con la sociedad. Alicia la vais a ver el gran trabajo que están haciendo, y yo creo que estamos siempre hablando de inteligencia artificial, pero no sabemos lo que estamos hablando con inteligencia artificial. Yo soy un paleto artificial, no me entero de la inteligencia esta que nos ha venido de golpe. Entonces vamos a escuchar a Alicia y esperemos que os guste. Es en inglés, ya sabéis, ahí tenemos ponencias en español y en inglés, así que afinar el oído. Venga, un aplauso para Alicia.
Okay, I'm going to explain in English, but the labels are in Spanish. Okay? I will explain how come. This is about artificial intelligence. Not everybody throws words all over the place, but what it really is a tool. Now, I'm interested in it because I'll explain quickly, because I deal with indigenous peoples. They create images. Archaeologists say they're combinations. We can use AI to solve our problems. Very simple question, very difficult task. What essentially AI is a label for lots of things. So let's see how we can use it in conservation. Because the indigenous peoples are part of conservation, which is how I became involved in the group. This is called Lang Lang Conservation. They are essentially an NGO. So imagine that you're in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, which is an area the size of Belgium. You've got 250 people managing it, each of which is responsible for the area the size of Malta. They have very little. They're dealing with people who are military trained, who have superior equipment, logistics, they have internal communications network, and they have military grade personnel who are willing to do anything to get, what are they after? They're after animal bits for sale in the international market. So how do you deal with this? Generally, everyone just goes, can't cope, can't do it. Well, these people, Lang Lang Conservation, said, okay, it's a mixture of people who are special air service officers, intelligence personnel, conservation scientists, data scientists, and people just saying, look, we have a huge quantity of data here, and we have to deal with the issue. How do we operate? We operate with a small group. So essentially, here, they started off with a project, and they said the whole point is to empower people, because they can collate and they can take the data together. So here we've got, this is desert elephants. And they said, okay, well, how do we deal with this? So they have a map. They have the spaghetti, I'm going to call it. It's the yellow spaghetti. It's the tracking, which they knew that the elephants were taking when they moved, because some of them were collared. Some of the spots are where they knew the elephants were. And then they had a number of people trying to find it. So the question was, how do we do it? Because they kept finding all these elephants were being dead. Yet they knew people were coming in to take the elephants away, but they knew the elephants were moving from the water where they were drinking and then running away back to the bush where they were hiding. So the elephants were under threat from bushmeat, from being trafficked, or from being wherever. So this was the question that Lang Lang, the first project that they had. How do you solve this question? How do you prevent them from being trafficked? So they overlaid a series of data, vegetative data, water data, and that's how they were able to identify what the elephants were doing. So they created this and said, okay, well, we worked out where they are and what they were doing. So they were able to collate all the data and synthesize it and present, okay, this is a solution that people can use. Now, this was done because you had the mixture of the data scientists, the conservation specialists, the intelligence officers, and they were able to go through all the data that exists, that is public, because people put stuff all over the web all the time. So all they're doing is essentially synthesizing and saying, look, you come to us with a problem, we help you find a solution, and we present the solution. And you can carry it out, but this is going to hurt. So this is essentially, it was helping people to make decisions. So they're essentially analyzing all the data that's publicly available and working out where they would make a series of recommendations on how to solve the problems or help ameliorate the problem or find who's the node, because it could be things are being trafficked. And so who's the trafficker, where's the trafficker sit, who are the agencies who need to be contacted to find the trafficker. And essentially it's a group of people who analyze vast quantities of data using various different tools which are all stacked upon one another to find the patterns. So it's essentially, you could in one sense say it's pattern matching. So it's all about taking decisions and dealing with investigations against commercial activities of flora, fauna, and wood, and thinking about sort of intelligence activities that you could in order to deal with the issues. Is there any, and it means that you can, the Langland actually takes all the information, synthesizes it, so that, because often these conservation organizations have very few people on the ground. Well, Langland has people who will sit and do this, and this is what they enjoy doing, and they've been trained to do it, and they're doing it at state level. So they've got access to networks all over the world to analyze the data, whereas normally an NGO, which is a conservation NGO, doesn't have that ability. So this means they can actually deal with traffickers and work with public agencies and governments and local municipalities to say, look, okay, you have a trafficker, we can deal it, we can find it. And they will present all the data, they will show the networks, but they won't actually be, and they'll let the local police force, if that's the police force who have to deal with it, because they're like, you have your own regulations, but we're just showing you where the data's come from, how the network's being created. In many cases, all the data's on Facebook. So it's all publicly available. So nothing illegal has happened. It's just a case of the data has been layered, and because it's data scientists working with conservation biologists and people in conservation, they're saying, look, we know this plant has gone missing. We're noticing it's disappearing. Well, other people say, well, we've actually found it over here. So it's essentially people saying being polymaths, but on a very large scale. Because being polymath on your own is difficult, but if you're doing it as a group, it's much simpler, it's much easier, especially because you have used digital tools to help you amplify the method. So this is actually an investigation, and this is the sort of paper which they'll create. It's actually real, it's the real scenario, but it's all been blackened so you can't see. But they are working to things like trafficking of pangolin scales, of and various other sort of things like that. So this is all the paperwork. So if an NGO comes to Langland and says, we're trying to find a trafficking ring or tigers, they will say, okay, we'll work with you, and then they'll compile all the evidence and track everything and say, this is what we found, this is what you have to do, and you have to go ahead and deal with it on the ground, because obviously it's not a police force, it's an NGO. But they all work with the partners behind the scenes, and they work in the Middle East, Africa, South America, South and Central Asia, and including in Eastern Europe. And they also deal with the trafficking of human beings, as well as people, animals, and various other things. So this is how you'd see that this is what happens when they start collecting all the data and they pull it all together. You get these different categories, and they see the changes over time. And this is when the data, could you start this a video? So this is what's happened. All the data this is one of the many tools, because they've worked with created deals with all the tech companies in the world to say, look, we know you have data which you're not using, we'll use it to compile it, to pull it all together, to track all the networks of different things, to be able to work out where is it moving from, why is it moving, who's doing the moving, and to be able to track things like the sale of pangolins, like the sale of tigers, like rhino horn, gloon, you name it, they can find it. And so this is what Langland does. So that's all, you're just seeing the networks of stuff being tracked. Some of it's on the dark web, some of it's on Facebook, frankly. And Instagram is a big place where you find the sale of animal horns, pangolins, all sorts of stuff. It's all publicly there. The problem is because we're so used to scrolling. We were talking about it in the Tierra group. We're so used to scrolling and so used to seeing vast quantities of evidence, we don't even see it. But because these people are intelligence officers working with conservation biologists, the conservation biologists will say, look, it's here. I've seen it on Instagram. This person, I keep seeing this person selling this. What are they doing here? And so they can start mapping it out. And then sometimes an NGO will come across and say, well, we have this problem where we keep seeing these animals turning out. Why is this going? Or we know the sale of bushmeat is coming out. How do we stop it? What do we do? Well, the question is, why is this bushmeat being stolen? Where's it going? So this is what Langland does. And applies all the different technologies that exist in the world to pull it together. So this is what they do. They raise the money. They don't make their partners pay for it. They just say, well, we know that you supply content, and we pull it together. And so NGOs will come to Langland and say, we want to help to solve this problem. And then Langland will say, well, how can we help you? And what can you sort of trade? Sometimes it's information, and then they will proceed. There we go.